Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for being here today for another one of JRLC training sessions. And if you're not familiar with the Joint Religious Legislative Coalition, we are a statewide, nonpartisan, interfaith advocacy organization, which begins our 51st year. So we have much to be grateful for in terms of the advocates that we have around the state and the influence that they have been able to make, especially on public policy issues. So today's session is designed to help folks who perhaps are new to legislative advocacy and also those advocates who want a refresher on scheduling visits with their lawmaker and communicating with their lawmaker. So I've invited two leaders from different parts of the state to be part of this. And then we also have a short video by a legislative assistant from my district, from District 43. So I will have Dennis and Kathy introduce themselves more when they begin. And I'm going to just review a few items about legislative advocacy and the importance of that. So I'm going to screen share here for a moment. So again, these are our guests, Kathy Lang from Little Falls and Dennis Dejevnov from St. Paul will be speaking about their experiences, high points and challenges of reaching out and scheduling legislative visits. I wanted to remind whether you're a new member or you've been a member with JRLC for a while, that we do have a number of advocacy resources on our webpage. And this is a booklet that we have on our webpage as well, Faithful Citizens Advocacy Guide, that goes into legislative visits, but it also highlights how to write a letter to the editor, how to organize people for phone banking and things like that. So again, there's a video there as well about how to be an effective advocate that you can take a look at and where to find your lawmakers who represent you. So today, when we're talking about scheduling legislative visits, we're doing that because we really want to make sure that advocates have access and credibility with the lawmakers they're going to be seeing. So access is certainly that ability to be in touch with your lawmaker as someone that you eventually really come to know. And credibility is that you're providing accurate information, believable stories, and real life experience and a faith perspective on the issues that we advocate for. So both access and credibility are very important to building these long-term relationships and having influence and power to create change for public policy. And of course, if you don't have access, if you're not meeting with your lawmaker, then you also aren't influencing public policy. And if you lose credibility by sharing, say, false information or inaccurate information, you're going to eventually lose access to a lawmaker as well. So we know that any sorts of relationship takes time to build, and certainly getting to know your lawmaker, your representative and your senator, know what they value, know the committees they're working on takes time. And that one-to-one relationship is important. And that can certainly be done via Zoom, email, letter writing, attending town hall forums, etc. And group meetings, which is part of our focus around Day on the Hill and legislative visits, is very important as well, because we want to show numbers of folks who support issues and that people of faith care deeply about these issues and want to have agency and influence. So again, this is just an image of different methods of contact with lawmakers to show what's usually most effective. Obviously, a number of our meetings may not be face-to-face, but maybe primarily by Zoom. And phone conversations, of course, are important. And it says personalized letter, but I would say a personalized email is, in this day and age, is very important. So I'm going to stop for a minute and turn it over to Kathy Lang. And Kathy, I can pull up your slides. Awesome. And if you would introduce yourself, and thank you again for being part of this. You have really stepped in a number of roles, and we hope to be supportive as well of issues that you're working on in Little Falls. So I will share the screen, and if for some reason you can't see it, let me know.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Kathy Lang. I am the Executive Director of Habitat for Humanity of Morrison County. Previously to that, I was the Healthcare Foundation Director of CHI St. Gabriel's Health here in Little Falls. And so that's how my experience in legislative advocacy actually began. I also am a board member of Oasis Central Minnesota, who focuses solely on affordable housing and emergency shelter in Morrison County. Morrison County, for those of you who don't know, it has a population of 30,000. We are in Little Falls. The city proper has a population of almost 9,000. So back in 2014, I wrote a grant for $400,000 through the Minnesota Department of Health. That was on opioid reform. And this was before the opioid crisis really came about back in 2016, 2017. So the grant was paying for a care team to look at patients just specifically one-on-one, seeing how many pills they were taking a day and trying to taper them off. The grant became so successful that I was panicking about how I was going to fund that after the 2 years was up. So my experience with legislators came from a panic situation that I needed money and something fast. So I had a friend who was the healthcare liaison for Senator Norm Coleman at the time, and she said, well, let's just go to DC and start knocking on doors. So that's what we did. So my first legislative experience was I called my Congressman Rick Nolan and set up a meeting and told them what I wanted to talk about. And I had data because the first 6 months we had reduced opioid prescriptions and saved Medicare like $400,000. So I had data in hand, and I was really pushing for money to continue this. And if we were a little county in Minnesota was saving all that money, what could other counties in Minnesota do, and even across the nation? So I set up meetings. As long as I was going to go to DC, I set up meetings with Senator Al Franken, Amy Klobuchar, Jason Lewis at the time was the representative, Colin Peterson as well. And so then after I was visiting those offices, I was talking with my local representative, Ron Krisha, and he said, Kathy, anything you do at the federal level, we can do at the state. So we were actually really successful, more so at the state level than at the federal level. And probably the highlight of my career was when Representative Krisha said, let's go up to the revisor's office and get $1 million in legislation, more for your county. And also we want to have other counties mimic the work you're doing. So so my situation came out of a definite need. So I think that's one of the finer experiences you can have if you feel strongly about something. So Joan, if you want to go to the next slide. So how did I go about this? I had a little help from a friend, but if you go and Google who's my representative, this comes up and you enter in the zip code, and next slide goes to show who your representative is. And so Representative Krisha is a great friend of mine. He also helps with Habitat for Humanity. He volunteers for us, painting, sheetrock. And so you eventually become friends when you have a lot to talk about. So the first step when I want to do a visit with him is, you can see here his legislative assistant is Janelle Buka. And so I just call her and say, hey, I need some time with him. and we go to his office, and usually I try to get in Senator Gazilka's office the same day, who is my other representative, and this all comes up on the website. It tells you a lot of information about him, which is kind of nice, so you can get a little bit of a background. In fact, Joan was in attendance when we had at First Lutheran Church here in Little Falls. Representative Krisha talked to our group with the JRLC, and he was questioning why some people in the audience didn't contact him because he couldn't figure that out. So he wants you to talk with him. He wants to know your views. So on the next slide, we can look at if you want to email your representative. So here's kind of the outline, and Joan can help you with this too. You put your representative and then his first name, representative.ron.krisha@house.min. So that's the format. And then the same is with the senator. And then you just put senator.min. So I find it helpful to the legislative assistants I know very well, because I knocked on their door enough times. And although they do change as well, and they many times have more than one representative that they are scheduling visits for. And so a lot of times, if we even through my Habitat for Humanity work, what I do is talk to the LA about, hey, could he hop on a meeting with us for this? I'm very much in favor of attending town hall meetings. That lets your representative know who you are in a group setting as well. And we have legislative updates in our town quite often at the beginning of the session, the end of the session. And it's just a chance, an opportunity for you to talk with them for a couple minutes. And then you can get feedback right away without even scheduling an appointment. And then the next slide, I believe I kind of wrote this as it comes off of, your representative wants to talk with you. They need to know how you feel. They can't be experts on everything. So when I was pushing for opioid reform, they were amazed at how the work of a few people can make such a difference financially, health-wise. And so you are your representative's best educator on the topic that you know about. And then I just also put in here, your tax dollars are actually paying him to represent you. So I know they don't get paid a lot, but anyway. Yeah, so, and talking with your legislator, I know a lot goes by. You have 15 to 20 minutes, and some are a little bit, if they've got other appointments, they're a little more willing to kind of push the meeting. So, and I've learned if you have someone in your group, if you go as a group that talks a lot, you might want to just say, can you sit outside for a minute? Because I want to just share this data and then I'm out of here. So I've noticed in my meetings that if you have a personal story to share that really affects them, being very passionate about your topic also helps. And then ask them how they can support your cause. If there is some kind of legislation they could help, could you go in front of a committee and share your story? I've done that several times as well. And especially the Health and Human Finance Committee, telling the story there so you can get more of those legislators involved. So it kind of escalates, your cause can escalate into something that really affects policy change. And of course, thank them for their time. So do we have any more slides, Joan, or is that the end?
That's the last one. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is just showing like a data piece that the director of OASIS and I went in to show how the need for emergency shelter. So I always go in bringing data of some sort and just really explaining my cause, which of course is very effective when you want to really make an impact on policy change. So.
Yeah, Kathy, thank you for sharing that and really giving your examples of the opioid reform that you've worked on for a number of years, and how timely that was, and how the hospitals certainly saw what was happening. So you had real life stories in addition to the data. And certainly with our advocates around the state, both those are important in any legislative issue that we're advocating on, is both the data, the history, what what will this be able to forward, or what will this solve, or what opportunities will a certain public policy issue
Right.
create or move forward?
Yeah. And I think it, like you said about credibility, because I know Senator Gazelka, when I go in his office, he knows that I need money for this and I'm going to do what I say. And he's,
Mhm.
you know, he doesn't spend money wastefully. He's like, if I give you this money, you're going to do this, and it's going to save money in the long run. And so, yeah, it's nice to have that as I go in and talk about affordable housing and what Habitat's needs are, for
Mhm.
sure. So,
Mhm.
yeah, well, thanks for having me today.
Yeah, no, really appreciate it. And now we're going to have a perspective that is a little different. It's coming from St. Paul, Minnesota. And Dennis, if you would share now and tell us about your experience and how that is perhaps different, and what similarities there might be with legislative visits, as in from Little Falls.
Well, hi, my name is Dennis Dejanev, and I don't have the background that Kathy does in politics nor advocacy, although I've been involved with a church social justice group at Lumen Christi Catholic Community in St. Paul, who has been highly involved with JRLC over the years. And we have done a lot of things as a group in regard to advocacy and political things like postcard campaigns and calling legislators on particular issues, mostly related to bonding for homeless and those kinds of causes. So that's kind of my connection here. I'm actually coming out of a corporate career, but I did work at the University of Minnesota as a research um, fellow, and I also taught for 10 years. So anyway, with that, and lack of background in this, I got involved in our Day on the Hill legislative meetings, and I believe Joan asked me to expand on the topic, not to talk about basically the conventional model that Kathy did a great job in outlining here, but to talk a little bit about how we've been evolved, shall I say, in these events. And we really have gone to more of a town hall-like format, which involves having our state senator, Aaron Murphy, and our House representatives, Dave Pinto and Kaylee Herr, meet together and online with as many district constituents as we could reach out to. So the model that we're talking here is really an exception. I want to make sure that's understood here, to the conventional model that will probably be more appropriate to most districts. But and maybe our model might not even be relevant or viable in some districts. But really, what's interesting about it is that it does have a few benefits. And the first of all, I would characterize it is that it tends to result in a conversation across legislative bodies, because we're talking the Senate, the senator, as well as the representatives, and different interests. And it tends to go more deeply into issues and values and value-based assumptions, and is rich and energizing. And it focuses on finding solutions and strategies, I think, toward, in the culmination of it. And secondly, it has drawn quite a large participation across faith-based organizations in our district, providing, I think, a fairly broad-based representation of those living in the district. Last year, we had 70 to 75 participants. So it's a pretty good audience. As for how it came about, prior to COVID, we used the more conventional approach of meeting with our representatives individually and in person at the Capitol. Although it was always a bit challenging getting appointments all in the afternoon of a JRLC Day on the Hill, and we did depend on the legislative assistants a lot to do that. The bigger problem was keeping the appointments at a time when committee meetings seemed to be in full bloom. So basically, we had several last-minute cancellations and occasionally time-reduced meetings where we might get the representative or senator for 5 minutes. So that can happen, and at least one of them had that kind of a constraint in each of the sessions we did that way. But with COVID, we were forced to go online, so our approach changed so that we could make the most of it. That's the way we're thinking about it at the time. We moved it to an evening time slot and promoted it within our churches and our faith-based organizations, and merged all 3 meetings together. And it seemed to work. So as you can imagine, having 3 legislators meeting together for a limited amount of time, the meeting itself became more of a town hall. We structured it as follows. With input from Joan, we prioritized a list of issues on JRLC's agenda. We felt that it would be very difficult to hit all of them, so we wanted to know which ones we should do in their order of importance. And then we scripted the meeting and had 3 co-facilitators take turns to keep the conversation fresh. We structured each a priority so that the facilitator first introduced it, directed the conversation to one of the legislators, and the one that we directed it to was the one that we felt was the most involved in that particular issue. And in fact, we had some cases where one of our legislators was an author or co-author of a bill. So basically, when Kathy showed you the website, that can help you pick somebody if you're going to want to direct things of their interest to them to ask questions about or pose as options, or we want to evolve on them a little bit. We had a constituent, a volunteer, briefly share a personal story or a connection with regard to the issue, and then we directed an ask, where we would ask the legislator if he or she would take a specific action to advance the cause. Once the legislator provided a response, we then opened the discussion up to the other 2 legislators for conversation, which usually got very deep into a lot of different things that I think provided good learning and also some degree of camaraderie between them. And then in closing, after the legislator left the meeting, we summed up our learning and next steps. So as you can probably imagine, there's a lot of work going on in doing it this way, but we felt that it was well suited to the needs and the politics of our district and was well worth it for us. I might add here, after a meeting yesterday planning this upcoming one, we are going to take a shot, if you will, at doing a hybrid approach where we'll have both in-person and Zoom as modalities for the conversation, so that we can add the face-to-face experience to the benefits we got online. So the technology is a bit daunting, but hopefully, I hope it'll work out. So.
Dennis, thank you so much, because that is an interesting model that your district has done in bringing all the lawmakers together. And of course, they work together and they support a lot of issues together as well. And I appreciate you talking about the pluses of that in terms of being able to go in maybe a little bit more deeply into some of the issues where they have, common work across their different committees, perhaps on, and that it, as you said, sort of keeps things fresh, or then people have different roles that they can be involved in, as asking a question or sharing information or sharing a story on those top 3 priority issues. I'm going to stop here for a minute. Originally in our agenda today, I was going to show a video at this point from a legislative assistant, but I think I'm going to pause for a minute to see if there's any questions or comments first before I show the video, to see, if there's something that you're thinking about doing and you wonder how it might have worked for Kathy or for Dennis, or just any questions you have at all about communicating with lawmakers, the legislators, and planning for these visits. And if you'd like, you can put a question or comment in the chat too, if you feel more comfortable doing that. You know, if anyone else has a different sort of experience as well in scheduling a visit and facilitating a visit that you'd like to comment on or share, you can certainly do that as well.
I might just share a little bit if that's okay.
Yes, of course. Yep.
I come from kind of a different perspective because I'm in southwestern Minnesota and it's a very, very rural area. So we have, you know, it's just different out here, I think, than more rural or more city areas, urban areas. But we've gotten to the point where we are very, very comfortable with our legislators. Some of them I see on, you know, outside of meetings. And so, and they know us, and that's really good. That's really the way it should be. And maybe it's easier for us because we don't have as large a population. Maybe they aren't meeting with as many people. I don't know. My challenge is to get more people involved in attending those meetings. Because it seems like, you know, we have a few people who are really good about it and they're the ones who know the legislators. It's really hard to get new folks in on those conversations. And I think until you've done it, you know, until you've experienced that, you don't realize it's not that hard and it's not that uncomfortable, and they are really nice people. So it's kind of fun to catch up with them too. But I don't know if anybody has any suggestions about recruiting more people to get involved in those legislative discussions.
Yeah, I would certainly, I'd ask Kathy L. and Kathleen Blake, who's here from Grand Rapids, and Dennis, if you could share some of your experience, Kathy L., if you want to start first, and then Kathleen Blake, if you want to chime in.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great question, Lisa. And I think people are a little almost afraid of it, but if you can bring them in, or maybe just have, we did something called a coffee with a cop, or you could have coffee with your legislators and set it up and start inviting some friends. Because I think once they start realizing they have something to say, then it's like, oh, well, I can make a difference in how this legislator is thinking, I guess. Yeah, we've done several community forums to encourage people. And I think it's just up to us as inviting them to come with you while you're talking with him and inviting him along and just kind of building that community. Because I know when we have our legislative updates locally, the same people kind of show up all the time and the same people speak. And I try to invite someone else with me, like, hey, you want to go listen to this? And then they get up and talk. So
I'm just going to say one thing that does remind me of the housing forum that you had in Little Falls, Kathy, and that I think you had a school liaison there who worked with homeless students.
Yes.
And Hutchinson, Minnesota recently did the same thing, where they, in addition to people from the congregations, they made sure they invited some of those individuals who are seeing people struggle every day. And if the people who are experiencing the struggle themselves cannot be there, they can certainly speak to that because they see it and they see solutions, you know, through public policy too.
Yeah, exactly.
And Kathleen, would you like to say something, Kathleen Blake?
Well, you know, we're kind of just regrouping after several years of not meeting. And so we're back to basics, but I know that in the past, what was really helpful was to go out and sit down individually with some people that you know would not normally be involved. And then as you find out what their passions and their interests are, invite them in, because inevitably, one of the issues that we're talking about affects them or someone they know and someone they love. But also invite them to have a conversation with another person. I love the idea of community forums. Back when we used to do that, those were very effective because that brings in people that are affected by specific issues, and then invite them into the JRLC Day on the Hill. We're kind of getting down to the wire here, So I think a lot of the personal invite is really, really helpful. Up here, we will be doing a Zoom meeting because, you know, we're not traveling down to St. Paul. That's just not happening, especially during COVID. We used to do it. We used to take a busload down, and that was kind of fun, but that's not happening now. I love what Ann Krisnick has to say about the fact that our legislators are basically hearing from within their own caucus, and they're hearing from people who are saying, cut my taxes. And so I think as I share that message with other people, I think they're like, oh, well, yeah, I could at least let them know that there are some people up here who think differently, because our legislators are all Republicans. So we're not having a lot of support for JRLC kinds of legislation. But I know last year, particularly our representative was quite open to some concerns about housing. So I think if people know, and as you were saying, Lisa, they're friendly. They're not going to bite our heads off.
Right.
We have the same situation here because all of our legislators down in this very corner of the state are Republicans, but they also, for the most part, they listen very well. And a couple of them are getting better at that. I don't think they used to listen very well, but in particular, Rod Hamilton, who's actually 22B and I live in 22A, but I talk to him a lot because he's just been really good about listening and even changing his mind on some really important issues. And kind of going against the grain with his fellow Republicans, which is nice that there's a few of them that have the courage to do that. But in particular situation that he did that with was immigration and the driver's license bill. And he ended up co-authoring it because he came down to Worthington and listened to a bunch of immigrants, a whole church full of immigrants actually, who told their stories. And he was very moved by that. And so he still supports that effort whenever it comes up, which, you know, we haven't been very successful, unfortunately, but yeah,
Nice.
so go ahead.
Nice work on your part.
Yeah. I do want to emphasize two things. Just recently, I heard Senator John Marty, who has really been behind healthcare initiatives at the state, talk about we all need to humanize our lawmakers too. And you're often addressing, you know, their care for the community, trying to sort of reach in and tap in to their sense of really wanting to support their community and trying to see or at least imagine the individual in front of him or her. And I think like when you hear those stories, again, they're very significant, especially if you have the numbers of stories that they hear.
Oh, and one other thing, to get members of their congregation, if you know what church they go to, it's kind of helpful to have members of their congregation in the meeting.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Dennis, did you have anything you want to add about reaching out, especially to new people who might, you know, who are there someplace for us to tap into?
I had one thought when that is sort of like the way we did it before COVID, where we wanted to get more people involved. And we would put announcements in the church bulletin that would announce the day on the Hill coming up, because anybody can be in that as long as they register for it. And then to put maybe a little blurb into that saying that if you're actually interested in talking with, you know, our district's legislators, contact whoever, and you might be able to draw on a few new people. We usually would get new people that way. So.
Yeah, thank you. The second thing I did want to mention too is Kathleen was a presenter January 27th, and actually I have a video that I have to get online this evening. It will be on our website on the training page. I have shared it with a few individuals who are district leaders, but need to get it out more publicly. And And Kathleen, you really gave some great examples in that training on January 27th about ways to, meet with people one-on-one. And it takes time, but that's the way we discover each other's gifts and our common passions and can invite them, further into advocacy. So just for a plug for that. I'm going to, if there aren't any, are there any other questions or comments? Then
I just want to
good.
follow up, Dennis. What did you say in your bulletin? You say if you want to speak individually with the legislator, what was the extra little tagline you put in there?
I made it up ad hoc here, but so I hope I can still say it close to what you recall. But after you introduce the Day on the Hill, because that can also, if they get involved in that, make them want to talk to their representative. But if you are interested in talking to the representatives from our district, contact Kathleen, and maybe you have your contact information, and we might be able to organize something. So you leave it a little bit open in terms of however you want to use the new people. But
Nice.
I would say that our social justice group, when I first started with them, was about 21 people basically, and now we're up to about 75.
Wow.
So and I think a lot of it is basically coming. And there's a number of highlights that we have during the year, but JRLC Day on the Hill is one of them that draws in people, because after it's over with, we actually posted some excerpts on our website.
Yeah, no, thank you all. That reminded me of something, but now I forgot what I was going to mention about that. I have a video from a legislative assistant, and he is talking about the most effective way from his perspective of how to schedule visits. I'm going to show it, but not all of it, because all of you have experience in this area, but I'll have it available online as one of our YouTube videos. So unless this feels more helpful, we can continue with a couple comments, but if you see the video, it might be helpful for others in your community as well. I'll go ahead and.
I would just say that the video helped me, and I've been doing this for a few years, because all of a sudden I've got a clearer picture of what the life of a legislative assistant is.
Yes.
And that really is some helpful inside information.
Yeah. And it gives you an understanding of why you have to be both flexible and very persistent, which all of you are. So, so let me share that. Go back and. I have too many things open here. I think I need to stop screen sharing and then I'll go grab it.
While we're waiting, Lori, I'm curious, where are you from? Oh, you're muted.
Minneapolis.
Okay. And you're just interested, or are you with an organization? Or?
I work on some of the policy research for JRLC.
Okay.
Our congregation is Westminster Presbyterian downtown. People who listen to NPR sometimes know us from the Town Hall Forum.
Right.
Yeah. And I think on a congregational basis, it's a little different in that it draws folks from all over the metro. So it's not as though we have a district representative for the whole congregation. But yeah, I've mostly been involved on background policy research for JRLC more than this end of things. So it's listening in to learn.
Yeah.
Okay, now can you see it? Can you see myself and
Yes.
Spencer now? I'll get into the meat of this conversation. And Spencer, if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how long you've been doing this and what your role is as a legislative assistant.
Thanks, Joan. Appreciate the chance to be here in front of this wide-ranging Zoom audience, I suppose.
Yes.
Yeah, my name's Spencer, as you said. I've been doing this. This is my 5th year on the job. Started back 2017 as a session only. They let me go, brought me back in 2018, and I've been here ever since. So I'm 4th in seniority amongst the LAs, if that shows you how much turnover there is in our ranks, which is mind-boggling to me as well.
Yes.
But in my job as a legislative assistant, I work for 2 reps. If you've ever visited with Rep Fisher or Rep Wazlowick, you've probably talked to me before. I've been with them for the past 3 years. But normally I handle their day-to-day, their scheduling, work on Rep Fisher's committee, behavioral health policy. It's typically the first line of communication between the rep and the general public. So that's the very,
in a nutshell.
The very basic parts. But we'll do anything from town halls to running things over to Senate to anything and everything you can think of.
Okay. So how do you typically interface with advocates? What's been your experience? And along with that, what do you feel has been the best forms of communication for advocates?
Well, pre-pandemic, we would do everything. We'd have visits in person. We'd have, take phone calls, be in the office every day, emails, of course. Town halls, like I said, we'd go out and do those more often, but post-pandemic, email, occasional phone call, email.
Okay, good. Well, that's really helpful to hear because I think at the beginning of the pandemic, some folks thought phone calls, because typically that was one way they could reach a legislative assistant or a lawmaker. But the assistant, especially in the office, but it's
right
good
now,
to hear. It's a different world now.
Yeah, right now I'm at home. I'm in the office 2 days a week, maybe.
Okay.
And it's mainly to do the physical part where we have to print letters. We have to see some people in person.
Right.
The building's closed to the public right now. So if you do want to schedule something, it's such a crapshoot on if you'll get us, if you'd make a phone call. So
Okay.
I know a lot of people have their phones tied to their computers, but you need fancy headsets or, and a lot of the staff are fresh out of college and may not have that, or it's just such a wide variation of skill level of who's doing the job. And not that they're not skilled, but it's just of backgrounds and home situations. And I know one of my coworkers has 3 roommates, 2 dogs, and a cat, and in a 3-bedroom apartment. So
Okay.
it's whereas I bought a house right before the pandemic, and it's just me and the cat up here. So
Okay. So it sounds like for advocates who are planning to schedule a visit, definitely to email you or their legislative assistant for the representative and senator is the best way. And can you just share how your email is formatted? And I mention that because we encourage advocates to go to what I call the profile page of the lawmaker. And then it does have the name of the legislative assistant and the phone number, but it doesn't automatically give the email. So for both legislative assistants for the House and for the Senate, can you just describe the format like what advocates should do then for getting the email?
Yeah, it's real simply, it's just our first name dot last name at house.mn. So, and the reps have rep dot first dot last at house.mn. So they just have rep at the beginning instead.
Okay. So
So
that is very straightforward. They can see
Yep.
your name and then just create the email from your name.
yep. And if you're not sure, there is a staff page on the website where you can click on any of our names and it'll show our email.
Okay. Okay.
So if you get a bounce back, you can double check through the staff page.
Okay, that sounds great. And then in terms of online platforms for the meetings, what does your office use for an online meeting? And what are you open to using?
We typically will use Zoom or Teams. Teams is our built-in system, but we know that not everyone has that, and Zoom is a little bit more mainstream. So, but if the best thing for us to hear is, oh, and we can provide the link.
Okay.
And that makes our job infinitely easier if you tell us up front that give us a time, we'll send you the link.
Okay, that is really good to know that that's your preference, is for an advocate to provide a Zoom link. But it sounds like if necessary, that your office could provide a Teams link. Could they also provide a Zoom link or just
Yep.
the Teams link?
Yep,
Okay.
we can provide a Zoom link. Although if you're scheduling, like I have a free account. And so I'm limited to one meeting per time period.
Right.
And I have 2 reps I work for. So,
Oh, okay. Now I understand the picture. So you're trying to schedule multiple or meetings for 2 people, and you may have some conflicts if you've got to use your own Zoom account.
and so the more meetings that are offered by the advocates or created by the advocates, the happier we are.
Okay. And the session starts January 31st. And as I mentioned, we're asking advocates to contact their legislative assistant for meetings between March 16th and 18th. But we realize it may be outside of that particular timeframe. How early do you recommend that advocates contact you via email or, legislative assistants to get a meeting on the schedule for the lawmaker?
I think 3 to 4 weeks is probably ideal because we have an idea. We're just starting to fill out the calendar that far ahead, surprises are going to happen. It's the legislature. If you've ever scheduled a meeting with us before, there's a 40% chance that you're going to get rescheduled just because of all the things that are going on. I would keep an eye on when deadlines are, because if they put deadlines early this year and that week turns into a deadline week, you're going to get canceled.
Thank you very much for mentioning that. So the committee deadlines, now that I think about it, they typically are in March. Is that correct?
Yeah, and with Easter being so late this year, it could throw a wrench into things. We haven't been given the deadlines yet, but
okay.
They usually come out within a few weeks of session starting.
Okay, so these are the committee. Can you just, as long as we're talking, could you just explain a little bit about, there's 2 deadlines. Could you just say a word about those 2 deadlines?
There's 3 deadlines.
Oh, 3, sorry, okay.
The first one, I'm gonna butcher this.
And that's okay if you want to pass on it too.
Basically, they're the deadlines for when bills have to get through certain committees. First deadline has to get through policy committees. And like I said, I'm going to butcher this because it's been a while, but it's basically the process. Whenever first deadline hits, basically there's a mad rush of bill hearings that week, and the members are having committees at all hours of the day. They'll go late into the evening to get these bills heard and to get them onto the next committee, and it's just a hectic week. So,
and once JRLC knows that information too, we'll share that with our members and advocates as well, because we'll be trying to get legislation authored and into those committees as well. Can you tell me a little bit about a typical time frame that a lawmaker has to meet with people, especially that this is during the session? We ask the advocates and members to be flexible, knowing that there might be a 20-minute slot, but that might change to 10 minutes. So can you just say a word about expectations for how much time typically a lawmaker will have for these types of online visits?
Yeah, especially for constituents, I know that, we try to bend over backwards for people in the district. It's typically the meetings are 15 minutes. I know a lot of reps these days are scheduling for 15 and blocking off 30.
Okay.
Because if it runs long, then they have time to take a screen break or time to get to the next Zoom call, or if technology breaks, or just built-in time where, if things go bad, people are late, etc. So, and so, that's my two reps typically, like I said, 15 minutes with a 30-minute block.
Okay.
I'll tell you if I'm giving.
Okay. So I stopped screen sharing. There's probably another 8 more minutes where Spencer does talk about, again, that most lawmakers really want to meet with constituents, and they'll do what they can to meet with constituents. And this was filmed in mid-January, so we didn't have the committee deadlines at that point. Now we do. So the first committee deadline is March 25th, and the second is April 1st. The third is April 8th. So we have this window that we are targeting for legislative visits between March 16th and 18th. And one of the reasons is it's following Day on the Hill, March 15th, but also that may be slightly easier for lawmakers to meet before they begin to really have pressure around those committee deadlines. So that's all I have for today. I mean, certainly I could share my screen again about Day on the Hill. We have another training coming up February 24th, and that's with Reverend Doug Mitchell from Westminster Presbyterian Church, and he's a board member, and Lorraine Rovick from District 18 in Northfield, and they're going to be talking about facilitating meetings and some of the challenges facilitating meetings in terms of a lawmaker getting off track or someone talking too long, et cetera, and in how you can keep the focus on the issues and on the stories and on the information and the asks that you'll have. So I do want to put a plug in for Day on the Hill. This week, I met via Zoom with the keynote speaker, and I'm really excited about her coming. Maharat Rory Picker-Niece is her name. And she's a legal scholar in Orthodox Judaism. She's also the executive director of the St. Louis Jewish Community Relations Council. She has a background in interreligious affairs, but she's going to take the text from Esther for such a time as this and really look at what does that mean for advocates from the lens of the Jewish tradition, I think, which also applies for such a time as this to all advocates, regardless of your tradition. She'll also talk about the tension between being in an Orthodox tradition and yet being, she considers herself an Orthodox feminist and working for progressive issues. So I think a number of traditions, Catholics, Baptists, Lutherans, we can all share that understanding that we have a variety of, I'm trying to think of the word, both progressive and traditional ways of living our faith. And yet, even in the midst of all that, the work for advocacy is still core and important. And so she'll talk about that tension of, practicing as an Orthodox Jewish leader, but very, very much being in a space of advocating for social justice as well. And then, of course, that evening, Anne will have more updates on the legislative issues, because we'll know, at least by the middle of March, where those policies are advancing. And again, we'll do a recap of preparing for legislative visits that evening as well. So if you haven't seen the flyer, it's on our website. There's also a little e-news blurb on the website to share as well. And then the registration form and the link are right there. So I really ask you to try to reach out to, 3 or 4 new folks in the next couple of weeks and invite them to Day on the Hill and to a legislative visit. And Lori, I know you're helping with a district in Minneapolis as well with another person. And I, again, appreciate the time that it takes to do this, but it's pretty common sense, and it's about relationship building. We're just building the blocks of relationships for the long haul. So any final, I've talked enough, too much. Any final comments, observation, words of wisdom that you all, since you're all very experienced, want to share?
Question, you had some slides up, and I'm wondering if we can see those, if you can send those out or something like that.
Yes, and I have probably about 7 additional slides that I didn't show. So I definitely will share those via email, and I'll put them on the website too, both Kathy's and then the other slides I was going to show. Thanks to everybody. And if you have any further thoughts, please send me an email, and I'll be in touch about legislative visits soon. Thanks to our presenters, and we will see you all very soon.